I thought I knew my husband better than anyone in the world. But the night I followed him to that house, I realized I didn't know him at all. My name is Rachel. I'm 34 years old, and I've been married to David for 9 years. We have 2 beautiful daughters, Emma, who's 7, and Lily, who's 5. For years, I believed we had the kind of marriage people envied, the kind where you still hold hands at dinner and laugh at inside jokes no one else understands. I was wrong about everything. Like, subscribe, and stay with me for this unbelievable true story. It started about 6 months ago, though I'm sure the signs were there long before I noticed them. David began working late more frequently. At first, it was once a week, maybe twice. He's a project manager at a tech company, and late nights weren't unusual during product launches. I didn't question it. I trusted him completely. That trust was built over nearly a decade of what I thought was honesty and partnership. The girls would ask where Daddy was during dinner, and I'd smile and tell them he was working hard to take care of our family. I'd put them to bed alone, read them stories, kiss their foreheads, and tell myself this was temporary. Every marriage has seasons like this, I thought. We'd been through busy periods before. But then the late nights became 3, 4, sometimes 5 times a week. He'd come home after 10 at night, sometimes close to midnight. He'd kiss my forehead, tell me he was exhausted, and head straight to the shower. I noticed he started showering immediately when he got home, every single time. Before, he'd sit with me for a bit, tell me about his day, maybe have a snack. Now it was straight to the bathroom, door locked, shower running for 20 minutes or more. I tried to be understanding. I asked him if everything was okay at work, if the pressure was too much. He'd give me these vague answers about deadlines and difficult clients. When I suggested he talk to his boss about the workload, he'd get defensive. Not angry, just closed off. He'd say I didn't understand how competitive his industry was, that everyone put in these hours. The physical distance grew, too. We went from being intimate a few times a week to maybe once every 2 weeks, then once a month. When I tried to initiate, he'd say he was too tired or stressed. I told myself it was normal, that stress kills desire, that we'd reconnect when things calm down, but things never calm down. 3 months ago, I noticed something else. His phone became an extension of his hand. He took it everywhere, even to the bathroom. The screen was always faced down. When it buzzed, he'd glance at it with this look I couldn't quite read, then silence it and put it away. If I was nearby when he was texting, he'd angle the screen away from me or wait until I left the room. One night, I couldn't sleep. It was around 2 a.m, and I went downstairs for water. I found David on the couch, phone in hand, typing away with this small smile on his face. The moment he heard me on the stairs, he locked the screen and set the phone down. He said he couldn't sleep either and was just scrolling through work emails. But I had seen that smile. It wasn't a work email smile. It was something else entirely. That's when the doubt crept in. That's when I started noticing everything. I started paying attention to details I'd overlooked before. His cologne was stronger on late nights. He'd started going to the gym, which sounds healthy, except he'd never cared about the gym before. In 2 months, he lost 15 pounds and bought new clothes. When I complimented him, he barely acknowledged it. He wasn't changing for me. That much was clear. I found receipts in his car, restaurants I'd never been to, some in neighborhoods across town, far from his office. When I asked about one, he said it was a business lunch, but the timestamp showed 8:30 at night, and the receipt was for 2 glasses of wine and an appetizer. Not exactly a client meeting. I didn't want to be that wife, the suspicious, paranoid one who checks phones and follows her husband. I fought against my instincts for weeks. I told myself I was being irrational, that stress was making me imagine things. I even made an appointment with a therapist because I thought maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was pushing him away somehow. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Tuesday, about 6 weeks ago. David texted me at 6 saying he'd be home late again, probably around 10:30. Another deadline, another crisis at work. I fed the girls, did the bedtime routine, and sat down on the couch with a glass of wine, feeling more alone than I'd felt in years. Something in me snapped. Maybe it was the wine, maybe it was months of accumulated doubt, but I opened the Find My Phone app. We'd set up location sharing years ago when the girls were babies, just for safety and convenience. I'd never used it to check on him before. My hands were shaking as the map loaded. He wasn't at his office. He was at a residential address 15 minutes away, in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. I stared at that little dot on the map for a full minute, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. 1,000 explanations ran through my mind. Maybe it was a client's house. Maybe it was a coworker's place, and they were working on something together. Maybe the GPS was wrong. I refreshed the app 3 times. The dot didn't move. I called my sister Katie, who lives 10 minutes away, and asked if she could come watch the girls. I told her it was an emergency, but didn't explain. She heard something in my voice and said she'd be right over. While I waited, I kept watching that dot on my phone, still at the same house, not moving. Katie arrived in 8 minutes. I grabbed my keys and purse and drove toward that address, my entire body cold with dread. The rational part of my brain kept trying to calm me down, insisting there had to be a reasonable explanation. But my gut knew. Somehow, I already knew. The house was a small craftsman-style home with a well-kept front yard and a porch light on. It was in a quiet, tree-lined street with other similar homes. Normal. Suburban. Not what I expected, though I don't know what I expected. David's car was parked right in front. Not hidden, not tucked away on a side street. Just there, like he had every right to be there. I sat in my car across the street for 10 minutes, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to drive away, to pretend I'd never seen this, to go home and keep living in whatever illusion of marriage we had left. But I couldn't. I had to know. I got out of the car and walked up to the front door. The curtains were partially open. Through the window, I could see into the living room. And there he was, David, my husband, sitting on a couch with a woman. She was younger than me, maybe late 20s, with long, dark hair. She was laughing at something he said, and his arm was draped over the back of the couch behind her, his body angled toward hers in a way that felt painfully intimate. I knocked on the door. I don't remember deciding to knock, but suddenly my knuckles were rapping against the wood. I heard movement inside, voices. The door opened and the woman stood there, confused. She was pretty, casually dressed in jeans and a sweater, barefoot. She looked at me with polite curiosity, clearly not expecting a stranger at her door at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night. Before I could say anything, David appeared behind her. The color drained from his face when he saw me. For a moment, we all just stood there in this horrible, frozen tableau. Then David said my name. Just my name, Rachel, in this voice I'd never heard before, full of panic and guilt. I asked him who she was. The woman looked between us, and I watched understanding dawn on her face. She took a step back from the door. David came outside and tried to take my arm, but I jerked away from him. He said we should talk in private, that this wasn't what it looked like. I almost laughed. It was exactly what it looked like. I turned to the woman, who was still standing in the doorway looking shocked. I asked her directly how long this had been going on. She looked at David, then back at me, and said 6 months. 6 months. She said she didn't know he was married, that he'd told her he was divorced, that he'd shown her pictures of his daughters and said he had them on weekends, that they lived with their mother. Everything inside me crumbled right there on that porch. David tried to speak, to explain, but I couldn't hear him over the rushing sound in my ears. The woman, whose name I learned later was Jessica, started crying and saying she was sorry, that she had no idea. I believed her. I could see the truth in her face. She was a victim in this too, just in a different way. I left without saying another word to either of them. I got in my car and drove. Not home, not anywhere specific, just drove. I called Katie and told her I needed more time. She asked if I was okay, and I lied and said yes. I wasn't okay. I felt like my entire life had been revealed as fiction. Eventually, I ended up parked at a lake about 30 minutes from our house. I sat there in the dark and cried harder than I've ever cried in my life. Not just for the affair, but for everything it meant. The lies, the betrayal, the months of manipulation. All those nights he'd come home and kissed me after being with her. All the times I defended him to myself, convinced myself I was being paranoid. The future I'd imagined, growing old together, grandkids someday, All of it dissolved in an instant. David called and texted over and over. I turned my phone off. I stayed at that lake until almost midnight, then finally drove home. Katie was still there, asleep on the couch. I woke her gently and thanked her. She asked what happened, and I told her I'd found David with another woman. She hugged me while I cried again, then offered to stay the night. I said no, that I needed to be alone. David came home around 1 a.m. I was sitting at the kitchen table in the dark. He turned on the light and we just looked at each other. He tried to explain, to minimize it, to tell me it was a mistake and it didn't mean anything. That made it worse somehow. 6 months of lying didn't mean anything? Building a whole separate life with another woman didn't mean anything? I asked him to leave. He said this was his house too, that we needed to talk about this like adults. I told him if he didn't leave voluntarily, I'd call the police and tell them I didn't feel safe with him here. That got through to him. He packed a bag and left around 2 a.m. I locked the door behind him and finally let myself fall apart completely. The next few days were a blur of shock and logistics. I told my boss I needed a few days off for a family emergency. I told the girls that Daddy was away for work. Emma, my 7-year-old, asked why I looked sad. I said I wasn't feeling well. She hugged me and said she hoped I felt better soon. That small gesture of love from my daughter broke and healed me at the same time. I contacted a divorce attorney that Friday. Her name was Margaret, and she was kind but direct. She explained what the process would look like, what to expect, what documentation I needed to gather. I felt numb through most of the consultation, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. David wanted to reconcile. He sent long texts about how sorry he was, how it was the biggest mistake of his life, how he loved me and our family. He blamed work stress, midlife crisis, momentary insanity. He said he'd end things with Jessica, that he'd do therapy, anything I wanted. But I couldn't unhear what Jessica had said. He'd told her he was divorced. That wasn't a momentary mistake. That was calculated deception over months. I found out more details I didn't want to know. Jessica reached out to me through social media a week later. She apologized again and offered to tell me anything I wanted to know. Part of me wanted to hate her, but I couldn't. David had lied to both of us. She told me they'd met at a coffee shop near his office. He'd pursued her, asked her out, told her he was single. They'd been seeing each other 2 or 3 times a week. He'd taken her to dinners, movies, even a weekend trip to the coast that he'd told me was a work conference. Every new detail was another knife in my heart. The divorce moved forward. David tried to fight it at first, insisted we try counseling, but I was done. You can't counsel away 6 months of lies. Margaret helped me file, and we began the difficult process of separating our lives, dividing assets, setting up custody arrangements, telling our families what happened. Telling the girls was the hardest conversation I've ever had. We sat them down together, David and I, and explained in age-appropriate language that Mommy and Daddy were going to live in different houses, but we both loved them very much and that would never change. Emma cried. Lily didn't fully understand, but picked up on the tension and got upset too. David held it together better than I expected. At least he could do that much. The months that followed were the darkest of my life. I'd wake up in the morning, and for a split second, everything would be normal. Then reality would crash back in. I went through phases of grief, anger, self-doubt, despair. I questioned everything about myself. Was I not attractive enough? Not interesting enough? Had I failed him somehow? My therapist, who I started seeing twice a week, helped me understand that David's choices were about him, not me. That people who cheat do so because of their own issues, their own weaknesses, not because their partner wasn't enough. Intellectually, I understood that. Emotionally, it took much longer to accept. I had good days and terrible days. Some mornings I'd feel strong and clear-headed, ready to build a new life. Other times I'd break down crying in the grocery store or at the girls' school pickup. My friends and family rallied around me. My mom came to stay for a week. Katie checked in every day. My best friend from college flew in for a weekend just to sit with me and listen. The legal process dragged on for months. Negotiations over the house, retirement accounts, custody schedules. David wanted 50-50 custody. I agreed because despite everything, he'd always been a good father and the girls needed their dad. We sold the house because neither of us could afford to buy the other out. I found a smaller place to rent, a townhouse with 3 bedrooms close to the girls' school. Moving out of our family home was surreal. Packing up 9 years of marriage into boxes, deciding what to keep and what to let go. I found our wedding album in the back of a closet and sat on the floor, crying over photos of us looking so young and happy and naive. I kept the album for the girls so they'd have it someday, but I couldn't look at it anymore. Slowly, very slowly, I started to rebuild. I threw myself into work. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected during my marriage. I took the girls on small adventures, parks and museums and ice cream trips, creating new memories that were just ours. I started exercising, not to change my body, but because it helped with the anxiety and depression. I read books, took a pottery class, did small things that were just for me. The divorce was finalized 7 months after that night on the porch. It should have felt like closure, but it mostly just felt sad, the end of what I thought my life would be. David moved into an apartment across town. The custody schedule started, and I had to get used to my daughters spending half their time away from me. Those first few nights without them were brutal. David tried to maintain a friendship with me, for the girls' sake. I kept things civil but distant. I didn't want to know about his life anymore. Jessica, from what I heard through mutual acquaintances, had ended things with him immediately after that night. Good for her. It's been a little over a year now since I found out. I'm not going to pretend everything is perfect or that I've completely healed, because I haven't. I still have moments of anger and grief. I still struggle with trust. The idea of dating again terrifies me. But I'm rebuilding, piece by piece. I've learned things about myself I didn't know. I'm stronger than I thought. I can handle hard things. I can create a good life for my daughters even when everything falls apart. I've learned that closure doesn't always come from the other person. Sometimes you have to create it yourself. I've learned that healing isn't linear. It's messy and complicated, and sometimes you take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. The girls are doing okay. They adjusted better than I feared. Though Emma still asks sometimes why Daddy doesn't live with us anymore. I tell her the truth in simple terms, that sometimes grown-ups can't be married anymore, but we still love her and Lily with all our hearts. They're resilient in ways that amaze me. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe someday I'll be ready to trust someone again, to open my heart and risk being hurt. Maybe not, and that's okay too. What I do know is that I survived something I thought would destroy me. I'm still here, still standing, still creating a life that has meaning and joy, even in the wreckage of what I lost. If this story touched you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and which moment hit you the most. Thank you for listening.